Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Clark, and I'm the Director of Choral Activities at Harvard. Welcome and thank you for being with us for this presentation of the Harvard Courses New Music Initiative. Believe it or not, this is the final event of the Harvard Courses 2020-2021 season. Quite a season to remember for sure. But a fitting way to end, too, with the presentation of these new works that have been created over the last year by our very own students. The Harvard Choruses mission is to empower students, student leaders, singers, and communities through sustaining and advancing choral music education and practice. And we do this through our work within the art and craft of ensemble singing, through building and nurturing vibrant and supportive communities, and through a myriad of values and virtues to which we aspire. Creativity and compassion have been two that have been so important for us this year, and two that are really at the heart of tonight's program. So when we think about creativity and how that works in a choral context, this is one way we've been exploring, and it really goes back to a long legacy, a long tradition at Harvard of students finding their muse and their motivation to create work for their peers and for our choruses. And we like to say that our work together is co-creative, where the students who are learning and presenting the music composed by their peers are also a part of this process and this circle of creation. And compassion, more than just a buzzword, more than just rhetoric. We've been thinking a lot, particularly this year, is about the ways in which music practice, music education can be a vehicle for compassion now and for all of our lives. And you'll hear more in just a moment about the theme of this year's Harvard Courses New Music Initiative, which was sonic healing, and a theme that each of our composers has taken to heart, reflected upon, and created works that speak to different aspects of this idea of sonic healing. So I want to introduce a couple people tonight before we begin. One is my colleague Nathan Reef, who is the resident conductor of the Harvard Glee Club, and he is one of our MCs tonight. And Nathan will give us a couple notes for our attendees who are watching this in real time and in synchronous time of how they can interact and participate tonight. So I'll turn it over to Nathan.
Thanks so much, Andy, and welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you here to join us for this showcase. As Andy said, we're happy to have you interact with the composers during and after their pieces as we share them. Each composer will give a brief presentation to introduce their piece, and then we'll share some information, including the text, for your reference as you go through the listening process. We encourage you to use the Q&A function, which should be one of those buttons at the bottom of the Zoom screen, to send questions, comments, thoughts, things that you'd like to share or ask to the composers at any point during this process. After we hear each piece, we'll have a chance to go through those questions and that feedback and have a little bit of a talk back for each piece before we move along. So please feel free to make use of that throughout. And we hope you enjoy. Thank you. I'll pass it back to you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nathan. So the Harvard Courses New Music Initiative actually celebrates our fifth year this year. This was started a few years back in response to actually so many students who had been coming to my office or putting scores in my faculty mailbox, eager to write and arrange music for our courses, or just choral music in general. And we thought we would provide an opportunity for our students to complement what they're learning in other parts of their time at Harvard, in the classroom, in other groups, be they the choruses, a cappella groups, or other musical ensembles, and to do this in a way that would unfold over a longer period of time. And so it's a great pleasure for us to be able to work in partnership with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Robert Kier, who is a graduate of Harvard's PhD program in composition, as well as a past member of the Society of Fellows. Dr. Kier is a composer, a writer, filmmaker. He's currently the Philip Knight Professor of Music Composition and Theory at the University of Oregon in Eugene, Oregon. He's a prolific composer, particularly of vocal and choral works, and really stands in my mind as one of our country's leading pedagogues of composition, most especially in composition for choruses and for vocal music, although he teaches and works with a variety of medium. Dr. Kier spends an incredible amount of time nurturing each one of the students that you'll meet tonight individually and in small groups. Before the pandemic, he would fly across the continent several times a year to be in residence with us, and it's just been such a wonderful partner and a big part of how and why we're able to do what we do. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Robert Kier, who will take it from here.
Thanks so much, Andy. And back at you, I just want everyone to know that Harvard Chorus's new music initiative emerged from Andy's vision of bringing all musicians together, composers with performers, and then of course sharing the collaboration and the collaborative spirit with our audiences and all those who would ever hear these pieces. That's so important right now in this particular period of music and period of music history and history in general. We've just been through, as Andy was saying, a very challenging year. And one of the things that we now, as we look back, can realize is that it was music and the arts that sustained us, one of the major forces within our lives in new ways. And we never saw the pandemic as some kind of curse that kept us from making music. But in fact, it inspired us to go beyond what we might have otherwise. And that's the beginning of a piece you'll hear soon, which is a very beautiful piece indeed. One of the inspired pieces. But it inspired us to go beyond what we might have otherwise done. And I think this year is a testament to that, that even in the hardest times, we're inspired at the deepest parts of who we are through music, through the arts in general, and through the connections that music and the arts make between all of us. In that way, we're all in the circle, co-creating these works together, and the mentorship process is part of that effort. I'll just tell you a little bit about it. We begin every year by considering text, and not just found text, which is often in years ago was in fact what most composers did, was to go and find texts, then inspire them, and then to set a piece of music that they created to a text. But in fact, we do it in a bit of a different way. Every one of our composers has the opportunity to create their own text, or to find a variety of texts and make a composite text, or in fact, to do what I just described, make a composite, but include original text as well. And that's the first phase of our creative process, is to explore the possibilities of creating text and music together. So the text and music is never separate. In other words, it's not as though we're finding a pre-existing text and projecting music at it, but instead co-creating text and music internally and letting that then become the piece that you eventually hear, which is from the deepest parts of each of these composers, what they truly believe in. And that's the focus of what we do, create the music that you truly believe in, which of course was particularly important during this particular pandemic year that we have just been through and that now we're emerging from. The next phase is to create a seed idea based on the text that has been created, and to hear that and discuss it with each other in individual sessions and also in group sessions where the whole community gathers and hears each other's work and discusses it. From there on, we have several phases of creation, each time mentored fully, and often with a month or even longer between each phase to give each composer the time, the space, and the freedom to create the work that they truly believe. The mentorship process is longer than any other that we know of in the country. Usually pieces are assigned or students choose to create pieces within a rather brief amount of time. Could be a month, could be a month and a half, maybe 2 months. But our pieces are created and nurtured and then rehearsed and performed over the period of an entire year. And so following the different phases of development of the piece, we reach that final phase where we focus more and more on notation and engraving to make sure that each piece is exactly as it should be for our performers. In this case, each of the 3 Holton choruses. We want to make sure that they receive each work in a way that, in fact, the actual notation and the engraving is itself a work of art that they can respond to and then rehearse. And they have feedback for us. So there is a period of revision as needed. It's an extensive period of rehearsal and then refinement, and then ultimately the performance. And tonight you're going to hear something a bit different than you would otherwise. If we were doing this in person, there would have been that chance to do these final phases of the process together in the same room. But of course, that hasn't been the case. These have been done virtually and in a way that is very time consuming and very challenging. And at the end of the process, we worked with a sound engineer, Luke Damrosch, who put together the different recordings that make up the composite that you're about to hear for each piece. And it's so important to realize that what you're hearing tonight is the blossoming of works, but through a digital format and not through a process of live performance, meaning rehearsal and performance. And so we are then going to aim for the fall, and all of the pieces you'll hear tonight will be premiered in live performance, and you'll get a chance to hear them then at the end point of what's been more than a year of development, refinement, and then finally performance, live performance, when we all gather again in a joyful celebration of music that will be announced later this year. Also, I would like to remark on the fact that this journey for this particular year began with a decision that we made, a group of us that were on a committee looking at how we might do something that would be very special for the situation that we were in and that all of us were in. And that was to focus on the theme of sonic healing. And in my mind and heart, there's nothing more important right now than to be involved in the arts in a way that promotes sonic healing. Healing on a physical level, emotional level, mental level, and spiritual level, and ideally all of those together. Appealing to the entire human being, bringing the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual together in a single work that has that potential of healing for individuals who are in greatest need and for everyone, no matter where they find themselves in life's journey. So in that spirit, these works were created, and I would say co-created with all of the different individuals that I've mentioned and that Andy has mentioned. And we offer those to you in this spirit for you, for the healing of whatever you're facing now as we emerge from the pandemic, and the healing of what we all have experienced, things that we will come to grips with, things we will better understand. And often that understanding comes through the experience of music and the arts, which at our deepest level also brings forth from us new visions, new ideas. We don't have to be artists for that to happen. So we go forward now with our first performance of a work by Devin Gates. Devin collaborated with the Harvard-Radcliffe Collegium Musicum, and the title of her piece is Meditation on 1 Corinthians 13.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, first of all, even though we can't see you. Thank you for being here on your Saturday night. And I also want to thank everyone who's made this possible tonight. So Dr. Kier, Andy, my fellow composers, all of the chorus students who graciously gave their time to remotely record, learn the whole shindig, still rehearse during this pandemic. Nathan, Jonathan, everyone who's helped out on the more logistical behind the scenes side. Thank you so much. This was a really daunting task, composing my first ever choral work, and you've made it such an educational and encouraging and meaningful experience. Yeah, so with that being said, this piece is about love. The text is actually based off of that well-known passage from the Bible that they read at weddings, and I'm sure you guys have never heard before. We chose our text ideas way back in September, which was still a really dark, kind of hopeless time for a lot of folks. I know I was at home for the fall semester, and I had been at home at that point for almost a whole year. And one of the things that brought me the most comfort, I guess, was getting into a lot of Black feminist literature. So reading, All About Love by Bell Hooks and, The Uses of the Erotic by Audre Lorde, and just thinking about the things that bring us together. So with that being said, I also, as a jazz musician primarily, coming into this, choral writing environment, it was intimidating, but I tried to bring in a little bit of what I knew, or was more familiar with into the piece. Tried to incorporate some elements of Black American music through some improvisation. There's a little bit of a groove in there. Hopefully you can feel it. Trying to bring you guys to church a little bit as much as possible. But essentially, I wanted to create something that could bring a little bit of joy and create a little bit of space to appreciate those people in our lives and that healing force that brings us all together, that is both music and love. So I suppose I can read this text and we can experience it. My first instinct is to start singing it, but I will not do that. My love is patient. My love is kind. At best, I try. My love displays no jealousy. I softly kiss your cheek and try to speak in the tongues of angels. Angels, show me how to fill my words with depth and breath and truth embodied in my youth. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled, and all will pass away and leave us face to face. I am in part, and yet for a time I feel whole, body and soul. I know that love never fails, but I fear I fail it still, and I will try not to think so much. Love has a special way of stilling hearts and suspending minds in time with truth that we only find in patience. Now I know only in part, but slowly I know you show me to see fully, to be fully, to know fully, as I am fully known. To know fully only when I am fully known. Slowly, in pieces. Love is patient. Love is kind. I keep faith. I grow hope. And though there is so much I may never know, I live in the moments you hold me. Overthrow me. When completeness comes, then we find ourselves face to face and known in love. Thank you so much.
La de la de la de gu, la de la de La de la de la de de la de la de la de. My love is patient, my love is kind. At best I try. My love displays no jealousy. I softly kiss your cheek and try to speak in the tones of angels. Angels, show me how to live in depth and breadth and truth, embodied in my youth. I am apart, and yet for a time I feel whole body and soul. I know that love never fails, although I feel my feelings still, and I will still try not to think so much. Suspending minds in time, with truth we only find patience. Now I'm only in part, but slowly I know you show me to see fully, to be fully, to know fully. To know fully, only when I am fully known.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Devin. I want to just remind everyone, feel free to use the Q&A function or send messages in the chat with any questions or feedback that you might have. What a treat to hear this premiere. Just absolutely fantastic. And other composers, not to put you on the spot either, but feel free to chime in the conversation as well if you'd like. Dr. Chinyere, I want to pass it over to you while we're letting folks add some of their thoughts and questions into the Q&A.
First to say that it's an extraordinary piece. It really is the embodiment of your inner life, an inner understanding of this text. And to have heard you deliver your meditation on it, first speak it to us, and then to hear the way that you sing it, as though somehow we've been taken to a different realm. We were on the earth realm, in the earth realm, hearing you speak it, but somehow we're in the realm of the soul when you sing it. Especially when we get to the final arc of music with the improvisation, where somehow all words seem to leave us, and we're just left with the pure understanding and clarity and beauty of the text itself as it blossoms through your song. And I wanted to ask you, when you created the improvisation, can you describe any aspect of your inner experience of that, share that with us? Or is it something that can't really be described?
It's definitely difficult to describe, as I'm sure those of you that are improvising musicians do know, like being in the zone a little bit. But it's really, well, for one thing, it's really something to hear something that you've written, perform for you, and then getting to, on top of that, interact with it and sort of, create based on your own creation is something that is a treat to do, and that I don't often get to do. And so in that vein, I guess I'm just thinking about, kind of like when you're cooking, like what is missing here? What can I add to make this sound, or taste the way I might want it to sound? So I guess just first listening to try to understand what's going on, and then, asking yourself, what can I add to this? Or sometimes, you can't add anything, and then you kind of just sit yourself down for a little while. But I guess that's sort of what goes through one's brain as they improvise.
And I also wanted to ask you, because you're a bass player and your major at Berkeley is in bass. I thought it was in voice, but it actually is in instrumental music. And how does your approach to improvising on the bass relate to your approach when you improvise as a vocalist?
Yeah, it's definitely very different. Partially because the roles in the ensemble are different, and you probably can tell that I'm a bass player based on how I wrote the bass part to this piece. I feel like it sounds like something that I'd play on my upright under a tune. But yeah, I would say improvising vocally, you have a lot more freedom with different tones you can evoke. You can also, the range is so much more meaty, and there's so much more you feel like you can evoke and express. People don't always listen to the bass solo. So this is nice too, getting to sort of bring that in, but also take, like I said, the way that I write the bass part, or the way that I factor in or try to factor in groove into how I write. I hope that comes across as well and is not lost.
I think it really does. And I think this whole aspect of embodying the text, and more than that, the inner life of the text, is just so alive in your piece. And to think this is your first choral work is really something extraordinary. So congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Chinyere. I mean, congratulations to you for, helping to create, 6 new works. That's incredible. So thank you.
Well, it's a joy. It's a joy in every possible way. Nathan,
So we
did
have
anybody,
we do have a couple of questions that have come through. Thanks, folks, for adding those. So the first is about the improvisations that you performed over the text "Love is Patient," and this question says for this listener that those improvisations evoked some sting, and they're wondering if you ever listened to him, and also what your influences are more generally.
Well, that's funny because Sting is another bassist vocalist, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a lot of like church influences, lots of R&B, obviously lots of jazz. That's what I mainly study right now. Um, yeah, I don't know, really. I guess what I was thinking about in writing this piece was like a combination of like, Sister Rosetta Tharpe and like Leonard Bernstein. Just trying to bring what I love about, chamber music and vocal music in the more classical sense and bridge it with what I love about the communal nature of, traditional Black American music.
Fantastic. The other question that we've gotten asks, how did you think about which lines were sung by the soloist and which would be sung by the chorus? Were there select phrases chosen specifically to emphasize the dialogue dynamic between the soloist slash Bible?
Oh my gosh, that's my roommate, you guys. You're the best, Lindsay. Um, yeah, I kind of wanted to create a little dialogue between the soloist and the chorus, mainly having, the text is kind of like literally a meditation that someone's having while reading the original biblical text. And so I wanted to frame it as the soloist is literally like the inner dialogue, the inner thoughts, and then the chorus acts as initially the text. Responding to that. And then, of course, initially, as greater understanding is reached, they coalesce more. But that's the way I sort of wanted to think about it as a dialogue, because I think dialogue is just super important, really, in every facet of life, but especially in music.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Carroll, turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And thank you again so much, Devin, for your beautiful piece and your gorgeous performance. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our next composers are Jenny Yao and Harry Sage, and they've created a piece titled Sky Sound, which they collaborated on with Harvard Glee Club.
Hello. All right, I am. So this piece that Jenny and I have been collaborating on since I don't know, September of last year, is a setting, or rather is inspired by a philosophical text from the Warring States period in China. That's the circa 4th century BCE, known as the Zhuangzi, attributed classically to the author Zhuangzi, though his own historicity is debatable. That we found inspiring for, I think, reasons Jenny will talk about in a minute, but that is originally written in literary Chinese, which is the language I've been studying for the past 2 years, and which I then used to sort of create an original translation of this passage that Jenny and I then, with the help of Dr. Kier, adapted and curated in sort of the most musical fashion we could, and also recognizing how the music can translate musical elements with literary Chinese and with, I think, any language can help to translate meaning that the language into which you are translating, here English itself, cannot. maintaining the structure and pacing of the original in a way that makes it a more complete translation and still something entirely new from the text.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really fun getting to work on this collaboratively and, like Harry said, be able to bring out the inner life and structure of the text, bring out the inner life of the text to life in a way that can really be explored sonically. So yeah, it was our first time really working on a composition collaboratively with anyone. So if anyone wants to know what the Zoom writing experience is like, it's all just like throwing ideas back and forth. And that really helped us kind of figure out the way to best kind of set the text in terms of figuring out what forces were needed. Obviously, we were really lucky to be able to work with the Harvard Glee Club. And we also decided to add in organ accompaniment, not only to be able to work with the incomparable David Von Baron, but also kind of explore the interesting duality of these two instruments of the voice and organ, creating sound through the same kind of physical mechanism of moving through pressurized air. So it was really helpful to have David's expertise on the balancing, like the timbral possibilities of the organ and the way that it kind of supports and is a separate agent working along with the voices. So definitely hats off to both David and also Nathan, and as well as Dr. Kieran and Andy for all their support and helping us kind of like make that, to bring those aspects of the piece to life. And kind of touching on our overall theme of sonic healing, you know, we are really interested in the ability of music to help us kind of connect. And though it wasn't directly inspired by this, we definitely thought about events over the last year where individuals were kind of robbed of their ability to breathe. So this piece is a real exploration of the concept of breath and its many manifestations. And like a lot of the other pieces tonight, it's honestly a sort of meditation of sorts on the connection, you know, drawing on ideas from this ancient text from 1,000 years ago and still kind of reflecting on and reveling in our ability to use the gift of breath in these myriad ways to create creative experiences together and connect with, you know, our fellow singers and even just anyone who listens to the piece in a way that I think is pretty special. So yeah, I think now we're going to introduce you to our translated text and read through it.
Sitting, leaning against the table, sighing, looking up at the sky. Can your body truly be made like a withered tree? Can your mind truly be made like lifeless ash?
You hear the sounds of men when you have not heard the sounds of earth. You hear the sounds of earth when you have not heard the sounds of heaven. And might I be so bold as to ask where these sounds are?
Nature breathes out. Its name is wind. And when it begins, the myriad openings are stirred into a wail, and who wouldn't hear its howling?
Looking like noses, looking like mouths, looking like ears, looking like beams, looking like circles, looking like mortars. Some look like ponds, some look like swamps. Some rush, some call, some bellow. Some breathe in, some cry out. Some roar, some whistle, some bite.
If there is a gentle wind, there will be a small harmony. If there is a gale wind, there will be a great harmony. If a hurricane passes, the throng of openings become empty.
If the sounds of earth are but the throng of its openings, and if the sounds of humans are but our pipes and flutes, then might I be so bold as to ask about the sounds of heaven.
It blows against the myriad things and makes each stop itself and each regain itself. What is the force of its ferocity? Who is the agent of its vigor?
Looking like ears, looking like bees, like circles, looking like waters, looking like green circles. Some look like ponds, some look like swans, some look like ponds, some look like swans. Some rush, some call, some bellow, some breathing, some cry, some roar, some whistle, some bite. If there is a gentle wind, there will be a small harmony. If there is a gale wind, there will be a great harmony. If a hurricane passes, the fall rains become empty. If the songs of earth are brought its own, and if the sounds of humans are baptized in fools, then might I be so as to rise above the sounds of it blows against the distance and takes each stop itself, and each regain itself. What is the force of its ferocity? Who is the agent of its vigor?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Harry and Jenny. I see we have a question that's come up in the chat. And it comes from Jonathan Mott, resident conductor of Collegium. How did you divide up the compositional duties of the piece? Did you both allow the other to edit something the other wrote? Describe the most contentious disagreement you had with each other. I'll leave it up to you as to who answers.
I'll start with the part with the easy answer. Thank you, John, for this question. So division of the compositional duties of this piece was quite strange in a way where there wasn't so much a division. It was a lot of time. Basically, all of the work on this piece was done synchronously over Zoom, occasionally in the same actual room towards the end of it, but mostly over Zoom using the remote control function where you can control the other person's mouse and keyboard. So I had my notation software open, but then Jenny would take control and start moving notes around. As for most contentious disagreement, can you remember any examples, Jenny?
I feel like I will have a contentious disagreement with John Mott for making us air out dirty laundry on this Zoom call, but I don't think there are any particular disagreements compositionally. I think it was just us in regards to like the remote control of each other's screens, getting used to each other's like keyboard shortcuts. But other than that, I think it was a very kind of harmonious process where maybe one of us would like pitch an idea for a particular setting of a phrase, and then we'd kind of work on kind of expanding on that idea, working on different harmonizations, and yeah, it was really fun.
There's another question from the chat. What did you find both challenging and fun and challenging about working with the Glee Club?
I'm gonna let Harry take this one since he is a proud member of the Harvard Glee Club.
I was about to let you take it for the exact opposite reason. Unfortunately, so for the working with the Glee Club, unfortunately, there wasn't enough as much actual like back and forth as there would have been in person year, and it was sort of a shame. I mean, the tenor bass chorus, as Nathan or Andy and any of us will tell you, is a very unique sound that after sort of being fully immersed in for 3 years now, 2 years when I had started this piece, I had a pretty good idea of like what worked and what didn't of the pieces I had sung. But once you then actually try to like take that information and turn it into something, it's interesting. Sort of the range of harmonies that you can treat is a lot is limited, or certain things will have very strong effects. Closed harmonies in the low range are the quintessential example of this, where you need the right spacing unless you just want it to sound fuzzy. And sometimes, occasionally, especially in the organ, fuzzy actually was the goal in this piece, but usually fuzzy is not the goal. So then maybe don't write like a minor second between the B1s and B2s. Jenny, anything you found new or interesting?
Yeah, definitely new. So this was my first piece for tenor bass chorus. I'm a proud member of RCS, got to shout him out. So, and I'd worked on a piece for SSAA, so like thinking more about that sound world. So it was definitely kind of like a different beast tackling the kind of sonic considerations of, TTBB. I think earlier on in the process, I might have suggested some interesting intervallic choices that, as Harry said, probably wouldn't have worked and would have been even too fuzzy for the effect we were going for. But yeah, I think in just working through the piece together, it was a delightful learning experience, especially like in hearing the recordings and being able to kind of like go through kind of revisions in terms of thinking about the balance. I think that was also a really great part of that process. So yeah, shout out to Luke from MPC on his work on that.
Great. Thank you both. Dr. Kira, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. And thanks to Harry and Jenny for their beautiful piece. Thank you so much. Our next composer is Chinyere Obasi, and he collaborated with Radcliffe Choral Society to create a work titled Tranquility, Sudden, Vast, Candescent.
Hello, my name is Chinyere Obasi, and I am one of the two Radcliffe choral writers for this year. My piece started as a response to the fact that 2020 was the 50th anniversary of the end of the Nigerian Civil War, and I don't usually discuss my African heritage a lot in my classical pieces, so I wanted to change that. So it began with Dr. Kira's composite text method. I was going to combine testimony from the war itself with elements of the Roman Catholic Mass, and then my computer miraculously deleted all my text. I am a firm believer in turning mistakes into opportunities, so I decided to create a piece then without a text, which the piece you're going to be hearing today. I'll admit, writing about my heritage and also writing for women's chorus were both extremely difficult. I was very much raised in like the Western men's chorus tradition, and so I was kind of trying to drift from that. But despite those difficulties, with Dr. Kier's help, I was able to create something that I think is at least moderately okay, and I hope you really enjoy listening to now. So here's my piece, Tranquility, Sudden, Vast, Candescent.
Really beautiful, absolutely beautiful, Chinyere. Thank you. Dr. Kier, want to get our conversation started? But you're muted.
I'd love to know more about your journey in terms of finding the text first, and then moving through that text to find this piece, which is a kind of evocation of some elements of the text that you originally began with. Do the emotions that we experience through listening to the sounds of the piece relate to certain aspects of the text that you let go of at one point? And if so, how?
To talk a little bit more about the journey, my original idea was to take texts from an interview with my dad a couple months ago and intersplice it with mainly the Pia Jesu part of the Roman Catholic Mass. And I'll admit that one of my favorite classical pieces is Flores Pia Jesu, and I think elements of his vocalese and his attitude towards syllables found their way into my work, even without using the same text as he did. And I had started a little bit to intersplice them. I had started to create the motifs that would end up in the non-text version. But again, through some twist of fate, my computer got water damage and I lost the entirety of the interview and most of my text. So I decided to take what motifs I had. And while I'm not particularly superstitious, I do think like signs exist, and maybe this was a sign just maybe not use a text, at least for this particular project. But I still used some of like the syllabic and motivic ideas in the original text version to create this one, as well as like following some newer self-imposed rules, because while writing without a text is, I guess, more freeing, it's also a little bit harder, I think, in my opinion. So like never having two different vowel noises at the same time, trying to avoid that problem. And I guess the final vocalese version is me tiptoeing around errors in a way, me making a mistake, going around it, fixing it, and moving on. I hope that answered the question. I'm not entirely sure.
Yes, it does. It does in a very profound way. I think in part the piece is what I would call a journey piece, that it's not only the journey of the music itself, but it's a journey of that very journey that you took with the piece. It kind of results from what you just described, this journey that you had with finding what the inner life of it was, not starting with words, but starting with something that is really, at first at least, not expressible. And you're trying to find your way to that. And you find your way to it through pure sound, pure vocal sound, and sounds which have really resonant emotions for us. I found that two of the parts of the piece that really open up, and especially in the upper register, there's a kind of very powerful emotion in that that you really couldn't express if you had words attached to those very notes. It wouldn't quite work. You really need those open vowels to do that. So I think that enabled you to find emotion. I don't know, do you agree with that? Please feel free to disagree.
I agree with it, but I also think it was not a conscious decision in my head when I was writing. I know it sounds very cliche to just write what sounds pretty, but that is kind of what happened. I had thoughts in my head, but I kind of wrote what sounded good and hoped what was subconscious would become musical anyway.
Well, I think it's worked beautifully. It's a very moving piece. Very moving.
We have one question in the chat asking, Chinyere, can you say more about the theme of the Civil War and the expressions you wanted the piece to give to it?
Sure. I'll admit, the piece's interpretation of the war kind of changed as I was writing it. But originally, a lot of people, let's put it this way, a lot of people in my generation who are descended from Nigerian immigrants have one or two parents who lived through the war, and so very much in my case, it was like a family aspect. And so I guess the original theme was trying to understand how a country can recover, how people can recover from a conflict such as that, from a conflict such as that. Essentially, when I started writing it, though, the SARS protests started happening in Nigeria today, and so the piece's attitude towards conflict resolution became less, oh, it's in the past, and more, oh, we're still dealing with this, and oh, how can we deal with it today? And so, well, I don't think the piece became more cynical as time went on. I think it became less of a period piece and more of a modern commentary, if that makes sense. And I think last minute, Dr. Kier could probably correct me, but I think last minute I changed the dedication to take out like the year of the war and make it just a lot more general. And I guess what expressions I wanted to go through it was a big theme of reconciliation. I guess that is one part I can say I constantly wrote into the piece. Most of the themes I write are subconscious, but ending on a simple or relatively simple chord was kind of part of that, trying to find what resolution and reconciliation can be. But I guess my answer is if I had like more specific or more easy to put into words expressions about violence and about the war, I probably would have used text, but because I don't have like more concrete expressions, I have to not use text, I suppose. I'm not sure that's the great answer to the question, but it's the answer I can give now.
I think that it is actually a great answer. You've told us exactly what you felt, and you've shared something really important with us, and it doesn't have to be somehow all tied up and neat. I think often composers share things in words that they expressed in music, but the words are a kind of tracing of that. And I think what you've shared with us has real deep meaning for all of us, and the piece as well. And I think of the end when you have that incredible chord that wells up, and then it stops and there's the resonance. And then we have quite a dissonant chord that's seeking a resolution. And one doesn't exactly know what that resolution might be. What will it be? At the very end, you settle on a minor chord and you really hold it. And it's a moment for real reflection and gathering the totality of the piece at that moment. It's very, very poignant, very moving. So thank you so much for sharing this part of your own family history with us through music. It means a lot to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nathan, did you have anything more?
No, no other questions in the chat, just lots of kudos. So I'll pass it back to you, Dr. Kier.
Great. Thank you so much, Chinyere. Beautiful piece. And our next composers are Chloe E.W. Levine and Ian Chan, and their piece is titled If the Other Do, and was a collaboration with Harvard-Radcliffe Collegium Musicum.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and congratulations to our fellow composers on all of your incredible pieces. It's so lovely to hear where they've arrived after a year of us working together. My name is Chloe E.W. Levine.
And I'm Ian Chan. Tonight we are so excited to share our piece of The Other Do performed by our choir, the Harvard-Radcliffe Collegium Musicum.
Over and over again, we are reminded that we are living in unprecedented times. Never before, the cliche insists, have we been confined to our homes, separated from our communities, and urged to detach from the physical world as much as possible under threat of death by a virus that denies us the opportunity to come together and sing. And yet life surges forward. Even as time stands still, there is no time to stand still with it. Pause for a moment, neglect a deadline, fall short on a responsibility, or miss a rent check, and there will be consequences. So we march on, we do our best, we turn in the essay, we finish the task, we pay the bills if we can. All the while, sirens rush by our window, and we cannot let ourselves hear them.
If the Other Do is intended to create a healing space in which singers and listeners can process the shock, grief, and trauma of the pandemic's terrifying early days for a few minutes out of the onslaught's reach. Catharsis, after all, is the first step toward recovery. The text, taken from a millennium's worth of poets who can remind us that though the coronavirus is unprecedented, isolation, despair, and improbable perseverance are not. It reflects a struggle to sustain connection in the face of unfathomable loss. If the Other Do features text from the following poems: The Solitary Goose by Du Fu, Isolation to Marguerite by Matthew Arnold, A Daughter of Eve by Christina Rossetti, The Schoolboy by William Blake, and A Valediction, Forbidding Warning by John Donne.
Moving through this piece may be challenging, not so much technically as emotionally. If the Other Do requires vulnerability and tenacity from singers and listeners alike. But if you can do so safely, we urge you to indulge in anguish. If we allow ourselves to feel the weight of this crisis, we can begin to lift it together. We can trust harmony even while we cannot hear it.
We'd like to thank Jonathan Mott, Dr. Eddie Clark, and Dr. Robert Keir for their insightful guidance and continual wisdom through this compositional process. Having the opportunity to learn from all of you was one of the most meaningful parts of our writing experience.
And of course, this project would not have been possible without the beautiful voices of our fellow collegiites. We are forever grateful for the attention and care they devoted to our piece, and we cannot wait to sing beside them and all of you, hopefully, in Holden Chapel once again this fall.
And with that, here is our text. Lost each other in the myriad layers of cloud. I look into the distance, seem to see, I think that I can hear. We were apart, no more to sing, lost each other in the anxious hour, myriad layers of cloud.
We were apart, yet day by day, I bade my heart more constant beat. We endure not yet a breach, like gold to airy thinness beat.
As twin compasses are two, thy soul moves if the other do. Thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I begun.
Thank you so much, and please enjoy our piece.
There's no reason to panic at all. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. The virus will not have a chance against us.
Beautiful and incredibly powerful, Chloe and Ian. Thank you. We have a couple of questions that have already come in the chat. The first one, how did you find these poems for the text? And how did you choose which portions to use in the piece?
Yeah, so I can start and then pass it off to Ian. Thanks so much, everyone, for your applause and kind words. And sorry for the ding. So I'm an English concentrator, and Ian is a comparative literature concentrator. So we both knew and loved a lot of these poets already, and had worked with some of these texts, though not all of them. And as we talked about a little bit in our introduction, we're looking to them for our own comfort, even before we were HCNMI composers, looking for words that could help encapsulate how we were feeling in the face of the pandemic, especially given the fact that the powers that be and really everyone kept repeating that there was no way to use the past or history or community to inform our experience of this crisis, tragedy, whatever you want to call it. And so we picked the pieces that felt most powerful to us, and then interwove them to map onto the emotional journey we wanted to convey. Ian, do you want to continue?
Absolutely. So Chloe's said most of what I would say, but I think the reason we turn to all these texts, especially the reason why we turn to texts that are so old, these texts are from the 9th to the 19th centuries, is because we really felt as if, other than the fact that we wanted public domain text, is the fact that we really felt like, even though, right, as mentioned in our introduction, even though these particular times are unprecedented, the feelings of of isolation and the perseverance that we can find from them are not, and we really wanted to harken back to that. And that represents not just the timeliness of literature, but sort of the timeliness of coming together even though apart, in the face of adversity as we see it today. So yeah.
A question from John Mott, as you might have expected. How did you divide up the compositional duties of the piece? Did you both allow the other to edit something the other wrote? And of course, did you describe the most contentious disagreement you had with each other? You must have seen this coming.
Thank you, Jonathan Mott, for this question. I'll start, and Chloe, feel free to take it away. So our process was very different than Harry and Jenny's. We did not, in fact, control our each other's screens. We did not use a remote control methods. And in fact, a lot of our piece. So Chloe and I actually first started collaborating in musical theater. This is sort of our our initial collaboration. So we actually took sort of a book from that. We first gathered together and talked a lot about sort of like what we envisioned the overall arc of the piece to be, what were the key things. We decided on text together, but then afterward, basically what happened was we did a little game of hot potato, I would say. Chloe would compose a part, and then I would compose a part, and then Chloe would compose a part, and I would compose a part. And obviously, we would continue talking throughout and making edits as we saw fit, so that the pieces would be could sew together in a way that we felt was organic. But yeah, Chloe, you want to elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I just add that I think we have really complementary strengths. I mean, obviously, we both have a background singing in choral music, in Collegium too, so it helps to know the group. But I have a lot of experience working with text, and am newer to classical style composition. And Ian is an exceptional piano player, and taught me much of what I know about how to write piano parts. And so those skills certainly offset each other well. In terms of contentious disagreement, we really and honestly had about zero disagreements. We've worked together on so many projects at this point. We were roommates our sophomore year, that we know how each other's minds work pretty well, and also took the time, as Ian said, to get on the same page before putting pen to paper, or virtual pen to paper, as the case might be.
We have an elaborate Google Doc comment method when we talk through things, and this helps us.
Great, thank you both. Dr. Kier, I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. Now looking back on the experience of co-creating this piece, and now with your experience of the pandemic as it has progressed and where we are right now, when you listen to the piece, do you hear it quite differently from when you were creating it? And has the experience of listening to the piece in any way influenced your overall view of your own journey through the pandemic times?
I'm not sure this exactly answers the question, but one reflection I'll say, a little glimpse into the behind the scenes process for everybody. For all remote recordings, of course, all the parts are recorded separately. And there are 3 vocal solos in this piece. There's the soprano solo in the middle that I sing, and then there are 2 sirens, one soprano and one baritone, and those parts are very challenging. They are essentially all glissandi, so sliding between notes, and we allow those vocalists to choose their own timing, and also their own vowels. And those were sung by Ian, and also Nivi Ravi, our dear friend and the former president of Collegium, or I guess current president. I don't know at this point. It just switched. Anyway, so we didn't hear what those sounded like until maybe we heard demo recordings maybe about a month ago, and the completed draft about a week ago. And writing those sirens, they were meant to evoke what it was like at the beginning of the pandemic when you would hear an ambulance go by your house. Especially for me, I live in Brooklyn, New York, and so you all know New York was one of the main epicenters of the pandemic at the beginning, and also high population density. So there were ambulances like all the time. And hearing what that actually sounded like, those sirens, in conjunction with the piano and the chorus and the other solo, 8 months or whatever after we first started writing them, really took me back to March 2020. And to me, just reaffirmed my commitment to what we were trying to do with this piece, and allowing people space to process and feel the weight of what we've all been through, even though things are starting to get better now. And of course we still have a long way to go. But yeah, there's a lot that we haven't taken the time to talk about, even as we talk about the pandemic all the time. And it's going to be with us emotionally for a long time. So I just feel very grateful to have been able to be a part of a project that contributes to allowing us to, I don't know, heal together. If you want to add.
Absolutely. For me, very, very similar things. I think listening to this piece definitely does take me back, and both serves as a sort of a reflection on, wow, that was something that we experienced, and in many ways are still experiencing now. I live in Canada, right? And in Canada, our vaccination is much slower than in the U.S. currently is, right? So we're seeing sort of that. So we're still actually yesterday was our first day out of complete lockdown. Here in Ontario, at least. But also, in to that end, it also serves as a reminder of like how far we have come, and sort of like again, as Chloe mentioned, or reaffirms the fact that I think our piece hopes to serve and serve as a locus both of thinking and reflecting and wallowing, if that's what's needed, right? In that feeling, but also if again, if needed, right, serving as a potentiality for to spark resilience, right, and to bring hope if that's what works for you. And so I definitely hope that we were able to achieve that. Is the bottom line.
Well, I have to say that you're both describing the experience that I have now listening to the piece, because I found that when I listened to the two drafts of it that we were given to listen to and comment upon, I reflected back on the year. It really had that function. It really does that. You've really created that. You've really given that to us. So thank you so much for giving so much from your own experience, and then allowing us to take that journey within ourselves related to our experience during this time. Thanks so much. It's a poignant work and a very beautiful work. Thank you. Our last work of the evening is by Eddie Raj. It's titled Cycles, and he collaborated with the Radcliffe Choral Society.
Hi, everyone. First, I just want to say great job to all the pieces we've heard so far, all the incredible singers and composers. It's been amazing. This piece is called Cycles. It was created in the midst of the tumultuous school year we just had. And I think it was easy during that time to feel like we were just waiting for things to go back to the way they were and for us to live in our own little world. And with this piece, I wanted to emphasize the message of living in the moment, which has been really important for coping with this past year. And I think it'll be even more important in all of our lives as we move back to normal, or somewhat normal in the near future. So this is the text of my piece. In my world, there is no hate. In my world, there is no pain. There is no rich, no poor, no reason to hate, no sorrow. It's my world. I'm happy there. In my world, nothing is known about tomorrow, but each day, it's this day that matters. Today, you make someone happy. Today, we can help each other. This day, today, is our day. Yet I know my world is not the real one. It's just a world of make-believe. Yes, we dream of far-off places, but our present never erases. We cast our wishes in the well. We try our best to fortune tell, but all we have is now. Yesterday has slipped away, but tomorrow is another day. All we have is now. So why does it matter if we can light the end of the tunnel? Why do we care if dark is all we see? It's my story. It's your story. It's our story. Believing you are who you'd like to be, that's all that it has to be. That's all we have to be. That's all I have to be. Just me. Cycles. We live in a cycle. Well, one day you'll see. One day we'll break free.
All right.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Hey, Dr. Kier.
Yeah. Eddie, it's an incredible piece. It really does have that feeling of being in the moment that I think you intended. There's this sense of real presence, of sound, of expression, and an immediacy. And I was wondering, because I know that you work in different media, different genres, musical, film. I've really very much enjoyed your film music that I've heard. And other forms of music, whether you regard this as a fusion piece, as though you brought together different kinds of styles and ways of making music to create this very much in the moment piece. Is that how you did it and brought it together with your text to give us that experience?
Well, because we worked on the text first, I think the text is mostly what drove the musical choices that I made. But it was, yeah, looking back, it's certainly in like a show tune-esque style. with some like repeating motifs that you could call from like film scoring. But mostly it was just what supports the text the most.
Yeah, and I wondered how you, I have a sense of it, but for those listening, how you chose certain motives or certain musical ideas for certain passages of the text. Was there anything in particular that you want to share with us in that regard?
It was mostly what I thought would. I mean, looking at, so I wrote the text and I considered where in this text is contrast, where in this text are we getting the message, and I wanted to also make it a very like understandable piece, because of the message that I was trying to send. So then I used formats like a sort of introduction and then like a sort of like a first verse. There's not really a chorus, but you can tell that there's like some repeated parts and melodies. And I thought that style just supported the meaning a little more.
Yeah, I think it works really well. And when the style shifts in various places, that really helps to add a certain force to the music as it unfolds. And I really like at the very end the way that final, you could call it a coda, you could call it a little epilogue, where you begin with the word cycles. I wondered how that occurred to you. Is that something you always had in mind from the beginning of the composition process, or was that something that evolved out of the process itself?
During the creation of the text, I was looking at some Buddhist texts about living a good life, to sort of, inspire me in the message. I ended up not using much of it in terms of a congealed text, but the ideas were there. And one of the ideas was that, we live in cycles, and a lot of days can be repetition, but you have to find yourself within that.
Yeah, were there any other influences in the text from any of your own readings, or it's their original text, obviously, but you just mentioned Buddhist thought, which I think you can if you read the text and reflect on it, you really can feel that. Any others that you'd like to share?
It was mostly just the way a lot of people had been telling me they were feeling and how I was feeling in the fall, starting school with all these restrictions, and sort of looking out in the world and seeing a lot of suffering and how people were coping, and that thought process carried along.
I think that comes through very strongly in the piece, and the whole theme of sonic healing. The text itself has a kind of healing structure to it, the journey of the text. And when you come to the end of it with the epilogue and cycles, you really feel that sense of it. It's almost as though the coda is a kind of benediction, as though and the moral of the story is, in a sense, and that I think that moral is strongly the healing nature of music, but also of living in the moment and really valuing what we have in the moment, even amidst the most difficult times of our lives. Nathan, do you have anything?
There's one question from the chat. Eddie, what's the most memorable thing that you learned about writing for soprano and alto voices in this project?
I worked a lot with Dr. Kier on this. I think it was cool to see, like, I want something really intense, like where in the ranges should I go? That was really cool because, people can get up there. I mean, they can really belt high notes. So you're thinking like, how much do I want to push it? How much do I want to really? And those were fun decisions to make.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Eddie. It's a wonderful piece. It's so moving, and you really can feel the sense of your description of not only being in the moment, but the process of writing it, and something that I experienced very directly in the piece. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us about it, and congratulations on your piece. Great. Well, this has been an incredible evening for all of us to be able to share with you the process of the creation of these works, the rehearsal, the performance now, a digital performance, but looking to the future, we look forward to a live performance when we're all gathered again together. And we know that that is going to be a very special day. The thought has been that people won't just rush back in to the concert hall. It may take some time, but let's look at it this way, that whatever way it happens and gathering at whatever rate that we do, coming back to live music will be one of the most poignant experiences of our lives, to finally be again together in a community, to experience singing in a live context, to share the joy of the singers as they present their art to us, and to respond to them in such a direct and caring way as we do as audiences. And I think it will bring about in us a new appreciation of music and the force of healing that we experience through music. And from HCNMI, we really hope that this project will inspire that in people. We hope that it's inspired that in you today, but we hope you'll join us in the fall when this is presented to you live, and share in that spirit with us. Thank you so much for being part of this tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon in person.
Thank you, Dr. Kier, and just a couple very quick thank yous. I've neglected to give a shout out to the keyboard artists that you heard tonight. David Von Baron, organist playing on Harry and Jenny's piece, Joe Terbesi, who you just heard playing on Eddie's wonderful piece, and Justin Thomas Blackwell, the pianist of Collegium, that played on If the Other Do by Chloe and Ian. I want to also give a lot of appreciation and gratitude to my wonderful colleagues, Jonathan Mott, Nathan Reef, Meg Weckworth, Liz Eschen, for all of their work and contributions. Incredible praise and thanks to the 150 singers of the Harvard choruses who learned these pieces at the end of a long year, who took a ton of time to make sure that we could get the best possible recordings. They had a great experience, of course, learning from their friends and making music with these composers, these peers of theirs, but it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always convenient. I'm just so proud of our students' resilience and goodwill all year long, a year that was spent entirely in this platform on Zoom, at least with the choruses. A big hero behind the scenes of tonight's program is Luke Damrosch of Harvard's media production team. Luke probably spent the better portion of 2 weeks compiling, syncing, editing, revising all of these recordings. It was a real labor of love, and we can't thank him enough, and thank the entire team at Media Production Services at Harvard for all of their contributions and facilitations this year. Dr. Kier, thank you once again. I think you've built a program that has really no peer really that I know of in just its breadth, its scope, the opportunity, the mentoring, the heartfelt trust and relationships that you cultivate. Well, with all of us, it comes through in the music. And let's conclude tonight with one final round of applause for our composers. These are just remarkable young artists, and their work this year provides so much inspiration for me. I know for all of our singers, and just how thoughtful and well crafted, and how much care you put into this is more than any teacher could ever ask for. So I want to just maybe give one more big round of applause, however that works for you.
Beautiful favor.
All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day or evening, And thanks for sharing this experience with us. Good night, everybody, or good day.